90% of consumers read online reviews before visiting a business. What do people see when they look you up online? We give you the tools you need to take control of your reputation. Send surveys to your customers via text message with Testimonial Collector. Get 5-star reviews on all the major platforms like Google, Yelp, and more. Track what people are saying about your business with Reputation Manager. Respond to comments and turn negative reviews into happy customers. See what your competitors' customers are saying about them with Competition Tracker. Learn great marketing tactics and what it takes to stay on top. A bigger social presence means more connections. Automatically generate and schedule engaging social media posts with Social 365. Build trust, boost sales, and grow your business.
Entrepreneur Life Show. Work toward being significant. Entrepreneur Life Show. Don't you worry, success will follow. Entrepreneur Life Show.
Hey everybody, how's everybody doing this Thursday? Welcome back to another day in the life of an entrepreneur. I am your host, Rose, and I am so happy to be back. I took a little bit of a break. As you know, we usually have back-to-back shows and also I'm a business owner and an entrepreneur is why I started this actual podcast. And thanks to all the subscribers, all the followers, everybody who has been faithful, asking for certain types of guests on the show, offering guests on the show, all the PRs, the publicists that have been amazing to give me the best guests. I mean, our downloads have been amazing. So I always want to make sure that I thank you. So the people who are continually downloading and are subscribing, I appreciate it. So let's get our housekeeping out the way. And then I want to introduce you to the guest on the show, which I was going to have on last year. But because she's doing so much amazing stuff, we have to push back the date. So I know a few people had sent me messages saying, hey, what happened to the show? It's just when you have great guests, that's sometimes what happens. So anyway, welcome back to the show. And as you know, we are streaming on your very favorite social platform. So if you are tuning in on Spotify or iHeart or one of those of your very favorite podcast platform, remember you can go to the entrepreneurlifeshow.com website to see the interview live. And for those of you, maybe you don't want to be on the PC, maybe you're at work, maybe you're hiding from your boss if you're still working. And so you just want to listen on your mobile phone or something on your podcast and have your little earplugs in, then make sure that you know that you can go to the website, just scroll down to the bottom, find your favorite podcast platform or social live platform, subscribe and get notifications. always want to say thank you to my day one marketing out the box, Sean Maddox, who is so great in my marketing. And he does a lot of stuff for the show. So some of the videos and things you see, that is him. He is great in helping me get exposure and make sure you guys connect with a marketing person. And of course, if you want to get to know more about marketing out the box, Sean Maddox, all you have to go to is iwantmorecustomersnow.com. And then of course, now we have Spinwax Radio that is launching, where we are also going to be heard there. Yay. So check out spinwaxradio.com. So before I introduce my guest, I don't know if a few of you remember when I had Julia Loggins on the show last year. She, has some really great wellness products. She has a fabulous story. I had her on. I'm bringing her back again. And why? Because remember, she was talking about her next book coming out, which is Revolutionary Beauty. So I'm sharing it. I'm going to have a book giveaway. So make sure that you guys, if you want to know how to get this book, look, it's brand new. It's in the bubble wrapper. Okay. She is going to be back on March 3rd. It is a beautiful book. She has quite a few books, but let me tell you, this one, very inspiring. So if you missed her on the first show, make sure that you check that out. Go to the website, entrepreneurlifeshow.com, and chat with me, email me, go to the website, send a message. How can you get this book? And she's going to be on the show March 3rd. I love having authors on the show. Let me tell you. Okay. Because they just have such great stories. So Tracy Crossley is who I have today. And if it is not the time to have someone like this on, it's always the freaking time to have someone like her on the show. Why? She has a BA, she has master in psychology. She helps individuals with relationship patterns. Understand the difference of just having issues, but relationship patterns. Totally different thing. And so I'm sure many of you can connect with what that means. She has a great podcast. She helps. She's, what do I say? I've seen a few of her interviews that I was very inspired by. So if you you're going to some type of therapy, I don't have a problem with saying that I've had to go into therapy. I've had some individual issues. And when I saw her and kind of stalked her page a little bit and reading her bio interviews, I've never heard anyone put it into terms where they say pattern, because people don't necessarily recognize patterns. So there's just a total difference. So I'm bringing her on the show right now. We're going to talk about that, introduce her so you can see her on the show. So I'm really happy to have her on. I'm happy for all my guests, but I'm especially happy to have her on today. So because she's back. Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. And I'm very happy to have you on the show because when I know that this says, because I say patterns, you don't hear that. I haven't heard that. And when it comes to people in individual problems or trauma, because I guess just people think of situations or, they were in a situation. They don't think of like the evolving pattern. So I wanted to start off by asking you, I see that, of course, you're a behavioral therapist. As in the introduction, you're an expert with that. You have a BA and a master's in psychology. And as someone who is in that field, do you think that for understanding one's importance of understanding the experience that they're having, how important is that?
To understand that they have patterns that are creating the experience? Is that what you mean? Okay. Yeah. So basically, we all come into a relationship with patterns. Why do we come in with patterns? Because we have a belief about how the world works and our place in it. And a lot of times it's unconscious until we become aware. And what I mean by that is if I have a belief that people aren't going to love me, just me being me, I'm going to have certain patterns of behavior that make that true. So your patterns do things to bring you, to, I would say, guarantee the belief has evidence, and that the evidence then says to the belief, hey, it's true. And the problem is we do this unconsciously. We don't even have an awareness this is going on in the background. And so when you bring it to a relationship, it is a problem, because if you're unconscious, you're going to blame your partner. You're going to create drama in the situation. You're not going to realize your contribution.
And why for me personally, and because I've said I've been on other shows, I've been through, I don't think anything's wrong with therapy. I don't think anything's wrong with counseling. And And I used to say for myself that, I was broken. And so it took me in and out of therapy for about 13 years to realize I wasn't broken. It was having to change my how I thought of myself mentally, and which was hard, very difficult, because that, like you said, that pattern, it becomes where you're like, well, how do I see myself differently?
Right.
It was very different. It was on and off for years to recognize my value. So my next question then leads to, according to health.com, as per their research in 2019, the National Institute for Mental Health estimates that 19.4 million of adults, or 7.8% of all adults in the United States, had at least one episode or major depression. What do you think of these numbers, and why is depression so very rampant in today's generation?
It's basically, for most people, there's not a lot of, let's say, bandwidth to understand oneself, because what happens is depression comes from non-action. Okay. It means I feel stuck. I can't get out of where I am. And we don't know why, because our tools to get out of that, we haven't been given. Like as kids, we're not given tools. Hey, someday you're going to feel stuck. And so this is the way you get out. We usually will go into a place of shame, because depression and shame go hand in hand. Feeling of guilt, like, why am I doing this? I can't believe I'm doing this. You beat yourself up and you feel bad for feeling bad. And so a lot of times, people get stuck in this loop of it, and they don't know a way out, and they start looking for, taking meds, which there's no problem with that. I'm just saying we start looking for solutions like that, or maybe we go to therapy. But what we don't understand, again, is it comes back to our perception. What is my perception of the world and my place in it? Most of us do not even have a realization of what that is. Like, we'll think, oh, I'm a happy person until something happens, right? And then I'm depressed. But it's really, how do you see things? Do you see certain things as impossible for you? Do you see certain things as being for other people and not for you? Do you see how you might be powerless and feel, victimized by things? It's really about, what is it for you that you're seeing yourself in this way? And that, to me, it was like, my own life, a big wake-up call.
I know that, and for myself, it took, how do I say this? When I finally started going into therapy, and then they give me assignments, and I thought, gee, I have assignments like homework. But when taking those assignments, I found for me, and this might be, it can relate to anybody, and if you agree that dealing with yourself was like the most we've lost her, guys, so hold on. I'm sure that she will be back. She's dropped, so stay tuned. She will be back on. I'm sure it's just reception. Tracy Crossley. So she is a behavioral relationship expert. So just hold on tight. So maybe she just lost her internet connection. Really excited to have her on the show. And of course, she has a book out that I want to talk about, and a podcast. So if any of you are individually, and you can relate to having these types of concern and having personal issues in your life, it could be, there's different types of relationships, with friends, family, and you're not really sure. And there's sometimes, friends can be considered your family versus, some people just having direct with family, or your employer, or whoever it is. Great, she's back. So I'm sure she just lost reception. 1 second, we're gonna get back.
Hi. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, I'm going,
I know how to ad-lib.
Where did I go? So yeah,
I know how to keep on going. Okay, so continuing on with what you're saying, as though it, for me, as I said, it was dealing with myself was the most difficult, because I now had to be accountable for the decisions that I made, because I was extremely aware that, okay, I have dysfunction, I have problem. Now I have a choice to make. And it was easier to just blame for a long time, because then it made an excuse for why I did what I did. But then when I finally had to take accountability, I at one point had like a breakdown.
I can understand that, because what happens is we're not taught self-responsibility as children. We're not taught it's okay. What happens as a kid, let's say you do something wrong, okay? and you are punished. Well, why would you ever want to take responsibility if you're going to be punished, right? You're going to look for somebody else to blame. Oh, it was the cat's fault. It was something else. It wasn't you. And so it can feel like you've got to go through a lot of shame to finally go, okay, I'm just going to, like, for me, I'm like, you got to feel your feelings about it. You got to allow yourself to feel it, but you don't end up living in it, because it's really when you start to feel it, you can get to the story you have. Because we have stories that we end up ruminating on, and that also feeds into depression, because again, our perception creates a story, and then we just keep living in the story. And my story is, this always happens to me. People literally say that, right? My story, this is my story, but they don't realize that they can change the channel on their story.
So that being said, then, and I like how you said changing the channel on their story, because you are always the one in the story and the main character, which I had to identify. It's like, if I'm always in it, I play some part of it.
Right.
I'm not always the victim.
Right.
So in connection with question number 2, what would you say is the best way to deal with depression? Is there someone that they need to talk to about when they feel unwell? Is that necessary to always talk to someone? And then who? I would say who?
Well, I mean, I'm not here to give therapeutic advice. This isn't about therapy per se, but obviously it depends on the level of your depression. I would say you absolutely want to take your depression in hand, whether it is going to a therapist or somebody who you feel can help you. And in most cases, you want to make sure, okay, you're not suicidal or anything to that extreme, because you absolutely should seek out mental health help. Absolutely. If it's something where, like in my case, I had a level of depression years and years. I didn't realize how depressed I was, right? It was always just kind of this heaviness over most activities. I'd feel uninspired. I would be beating myself up. And so I would just kind of stay stuck in this really icky loop. And so for me, I went to therapy. Therapy really didn't do very much for me in terms of changing my life. It was great to have somebody to talk to about stuff, but it didn't really give me the, let's say, the steering wheel to steer myself out of it.
Right. When now being a relationship expert, why do you think it is so difficult for, how do I say, when it comes to relationships with family? And I'm not just talking about like, marriage and boyfriends and girlfriends and wives and husbands, that people seem to allow their families to do things and hinder them and hurt them and find excuses to be accepted of it, versus if it were a stranger or their neighbor or a coworker. You get what I'm saying? And so, and then identify that your family, the relationship that you have with family or people within your family are sometimes, I guess, the worst thing for you. You know what I'm saying? And how do how to identify that?
Well, okay. So here again, when you're talking about people outside of you being the worst thing for you, you're not necessarily taking responsibility, because they are triggers. They're not your actual problem. So oftentimes, like your family you're born into, as an example. So you had lifelong patterns of behavior. You have a dynamic with them, a relational dynamic that, if it's dysfunctional, you're going to be what they call the drama triangle, which is an upside down triangle with the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor on it. And you're going to be switching positions depending on which family member it is. And so, so the minute you step back into it, and remember, you are participating. You are not an observer. Okay. So you're going right back into the same dynamic that you're used to. It takes a lot of awareness, and it takes a lot of and I'm talking deep work, to really start to break those patterns, because those people, the ones you were born, the family you're born into, they are basically just triggers. They're not the problem. And anytime somebody says to me, I got to get the toxic people out of my life. Well, no, how are you relating to them? What are you doing that's costing you in that situation? It's a great opportunity to learn that you can really be around anybody and be okay. It is not up to other people whether you're okay or not.
Oh, that's that said a lot right there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that that really affected me. That said a lot. And in one of your interviews, you were talking about insecure attachment.
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So insecure attachment is basically based on a theory of it's attachment theory. And it was developed in the late 1960s. And when it was developed, it was talking about babies. And then it's been built on since then. But Dr. John Bowlby was who came up with it. And then he had an assistant, Mary Ainsworth, and she went on to do something called the Strange Experiment, where she came up with attachment styles. And so all this to say that when you come out into the world, you have a little personality and you have certain needs. And if you have a caregiver who is consistent in emotional and physical response to you, you probably have a secure attachment style where you don't have, let's say, a fear of abandonment. You don't feel anxious about whether someone's going to love you or not love you, or you're going to get attention or not. You may learn to ignore your own needs. You may learn to, get along in the world how you think you have to. And this is as a kid. And so we develop these beliefs, right? Like if I have a parent who's inconsistent, who shows me attention that's positive at one moment, and then for the same thing shows me negative attention, it's going to be inconsistent. I'm going to be like, oh, what's up? I don't know. This parent's disorganized in how they're emotionally treating you. But the problem with it is you develop your sense of self from that. Like I'm lovable or I'm not lovable. I am okay. I'm not okay. I mean, it leads to all of these different ways that we show up because we start to think this is how love is. Love's not unconditional. Love is something either I have to work hard for. Maybe I have to be a perfectionist. Maybe I'm a people pleaser. Maybe I'm all these things. And we grow up and we bring this into our adult relationships because most of us, again, and I'm not beating people up when I say we don't have the awareness. We don't have the awareness because what would give us awareness? It's not like the adults in our lives are going to go, you should have self-awareness.
Right? Yeah, but I can see why it would be so unknowingly easy to not know how to make the correct decisions because you're always questioning your first decision. And right. So you continually question yourself. That makes sense. I mean, I didn't think of it looking at it like that because that actually relates to me. So, and then never being confident about the decision that you make and the choice and the people that you choose.
Right. It's very difficult to do that. I had insecure attachment myself, right? And so one of the biggest problems I find in working with people is that we second guess ourselves. We don't trust ourselves because there was no support in that way as a kid, unless perhaps you were pleasing somebody. But when you really start to take yourself in hand and be who you really are, like be your true self, you're going to disappoint people. You might upset people. And that's because you have previously built expectations that they have of you from your own behavior, right? So you start, right? And you start changing that, and that's going to happen. And that's not up to you to fix it with the other person. It's to say, look, I don't want to be resentful towards you anymore because I'm always sacrificing for you and it's my choice and I'm taking responsibility for it and I'm going to stop doing it. Doesn't mean I won't ever help you or be there for you, but it's not going to be at my cost.
Oh my, let me tell you, you are like preaching to let me tell you, I've had people on the show before that explained about certain things having to do with, wellness, of course, and health. But right. This is really deep because you can't even get to some of these points without even dealing with some of these facts.
Right. Yep. Most of us are afraid because again, going back to childhood, right? So we are in our heads. So we're living in here. Okay. We're not living in our whole body. And the problem with that is, well, let me go back a little bit. So the reason you do that is that's because as a kid, you get into pain, you're hurt, you're sad, whatever. Who as a little kid likes those feelings? Those are big feelings in a little body. And so what we end up doing is we're strategizing. Okay, how do I get through this situation? That's why you become a people pleaser. That's why you become a perfectionist. That's why you become these things, because it's a strategy to get love, to get attention, not to get criticism, not to be punished. So you're not yourself, right? And so what we do is we'll live up here. And one of the things when I work with people is to get them into their whole body, because your emotions don't live in your head. Your emotions live in your body. But we've been avoiding them, like I said, since we were kids because they were so big back then. And so to go back to that, it's you have fear that's like you're 5 years old and have fear because that's the last time you actually probably felt something that scared you to death. And you're like, I don't want to feel that again. And so all of the things you do are to try to keep those feelings away from you by trying to control the people around you.
So my next question then would be in this modern day era, this full of fakes, or as we should say, a lot of drama or realistic approach on social media. And I see quite a bit of people who are, and I'm not speaking negative of anybody who has this title, because, I just like to have people on my show who actually have certain types of credentials and the history. But there's people who often say, oh, I'm a wellness coach, health coach, spiritual coach. And these people say, oh, take a class. And they're giving all this advice online, and people are using social media as their treatment.
Oh God, yes.
And so, what is your thought on that? Because for mental health, I mean, that is, to me, that's dangerous, for me, because you don't know who you're sharing information with, or even what their real experience or how they could really help you.
Well, there's a couple things. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I was talking when I was pitching my book, and someone was saying, because in my book, I have a share of, the professional and the personal in it, right? Because I have some personal stories and stuff in there. Because I wrote this book from both perspectives. And it was interesting because the publisher was saying that what's become popular is for people to share their experiences rather than people looking for credentials. And I don't know if it was social media caused that, and then, went to the publishing industry or vice versa. But the point is, I'm going to say this because it's funny you said that, because I went on TikTok the other day because my marketing person sent me this video from a relationship coach, and it was like, are you kidding me? And this is what I mean. Whenever you're looking at social media and it allows you to stay in your victim position, it is not healthy for you. Okay. So like if you're looking up, what do I do about this narcissist and how they treat me? Well, guess what? You get to go, well, wait a minute. What am I doing here? Why am I making the choice to be here? Not how do I handle the narcissist, right? Because when you have people giving that kind of advice, it's crappy advice. It's not helping you. It's like you're learning to control or manipulate a situation that way. And so, yeah, anytime you're looking for that kind of information, that's exactly what you're doing. Instead, it's what can I do about my attraction to a narcissist?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I like that, how you said my attraction to that. Why am I finding my certain, like when I used to choose, I realized when the relationships I had, and I kept choosing them, and it was the same type until literally I had to stop dating completely and just say, you just have to stop, because you're the one who keeps choosing them. And then, and I remember being single for so many years. And then I was out of counseling for about 4 or 5 years, and I went back in. And then I was just like, because I finally realized I didn't even know what I was looking for, what my problem was. But then it all went back to, like you were saying, things that happened when I was very young that I just would not deal with, that was helping me to continue to move on and then fix all the other things that came along with that, because that traumatic experience. Then I even felt, like you said, guilty because of ways I acted or treated people, because I was upset. I was hurt with how I was treated. So I didn't feel another person's, pain.
Right.
So talking about social media, this is just a random question for you. Since we all know people nowadays that are into social media to some point, that sometimes they are not being themselves, which then they can end up becoming trapped in being someone else and not realize it. And so how important is social media to your mental health? You know, like for me, I had to block out certain, I started doing this about 2-3 years ago. I had to watch who I followed, watch what was posting, and then on my timeline, how things would show up. I had to start like block, because I easily saw myself just getting caught up like in a trend, and it would change my thinking. Even if it was for a short time, I was like, oh, I have to catch what I'm doing. You know, why am I even watching that? And but it was causing negativity for me. Or if it wasn't causing negativity, I was finding myself not being proud of who I am, wanting to be something different, look different, act different. Does that make sense?
It does. And the problem is, okay, so when you become aware of certain things you're doing, right? So there also isn't a magic pill that happens at that point, you know? It's you are confronted with, okay, there are actions I still need to take, and I have feelings about that. And most of us are afraid to do that because and this is a biological, physiological issue, okay?
Right.
Because you have the old part of your brain, you know, that we call it the lizard brain. And what happens is you are basically acting in a way that your survival is not guaranteed. So that's that part, okay? That part of your brain, it wants you to stay in patterns that are familiar. Because if they're familiar, that part of your brain is like, you're going to stay alive. Doesn't care if you're happy, sad, none of that matters, okay? It's the patterns that you know are going to be what rule you unless you're willing to get uncomfortable. When you get uncomfortable, you know, I am in new territory. I'm not in the same old territory. But what we do is we get uptight when we get into that discomfort, and we're kind of clawing our way back to finding the comfort zone. And so then it makes it really hard to move out of that. But the truth is, if you can hold on and you can go through the discomfort, you're just breaking a pattern. You're changing your life. You will get to a place where you feel a sense of emotional freedom, which will feel different than being comfortable, which comfortable doesn't really feel great. It just kind of keeps you in something, you know, mediocrity, right? You'll feel a sense of freedom. Like you'll get out of the discomfort and you'll go, oh my God, I feel like I'm 5 years old. Like I have a sense of giddiness because now I feel like a part of my life has opened up to me. And what starts to happen, the more you do this, you build the muscle of self-empowerment. That's how you become empowered.
I know that one of the most famous statements in comforting someone, or the people say, it's okay not to be okay. Or what do you say? So to ask when is it okay not to be okay, and when is it okay just to say it?
Anytime, say it. You know, I say it all the time. What I do is I don't go, oh, okay, it's okay, I'm not okay. It's okay, whatever is happening for me, right? It's okay because I'm reacting to circumstances outside of me, or it's okay, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Because when you don't make a thing out of it, so what you're doing, I'm going to try and explain it without being too esoteric, but really what you are doing, okay, is by saying you're okay with not being okay, you're stopping a struggle and a distraction, okay? So if I am not okay, let's say I wake up on the wrong side of the bed and I'm pissed off about that, or I'm trying to get myself happy. What you're doing is you're creating a struggle for yourself because you don't really feel good trying to get out of a crappy mood, like forcing yourself to get out of a crappy mood to get happy. You feel worse. And what you're doing is you're not actually allowing yourself to just feel the feeling so it can like float away. Like the minute you say, it's okay, I feel this way, and you mean it, then it disappears. It stops being the thing. And that is how people, you know, we know this when we come into this world. Our conditioning changes things because we try to act how we think we have to, instead of going, it's okay that I'm sad. You know, a lot of us when we were kids, we were crying. I'm going to give you a reason to cry, right? Wasn't mom saying?
Right.
Yeah. Same thing.
So being a relationship expert, let's just say you're in a relationship at the time. So I'm sure that you can be very familiar with this. And some people, when they're in a relationship don't know how to, and I'm not saying get out of a relationship, still be themselves and be healthy in a relationship. And if they need some type of direct guidance or help, but sometimes, unfortunately, and this is unfortunate for some people, their other person who they're in that relationship with doesn't see there's an issue. Is there anything that you offer to where persons will, I'm going to do this individually myself, and they could do it virtually because maybe they don't want their better half or person or family member to understand, like, I think I need this help myself. But sometimes the other person doesn't think you need anything. They want to convince you that you don't, but you're just feeling unhappy. You're feeling unhealthy. You're not sure if the relationship is what it is. Because when you're inside of something, sometimes you can't see it, but you're uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. The problem is right there. And that is, you don't want other people in charge of your emotional well-being. Why we give it to other people is because, again, going back to childhood, where we allowed our emotional well-being to be ruled by other people because, you're a little kid, you don't know any better, you're learning about the world. Yeah. But as an adult, it doesn't matter if somebody else thinks you need to get help or not get help, because you've got to honor your own feelings. And if they're crappy feelings, you got to honor it and go, this isn't how I want to feel. And it's not up to anybody outside of you to make you feel better, because that's kind of an impossible thing. We are the ones who choose to go, okay, if I'm going to take action to change how I feel, great. If I'm not going to take action to change how I feel, and I'm just going to deal with feeling crappy, then I'm going to be stuck feeling crappy. But a lot of times what we're doing is we're waiting for people outside of us, our partner, to change or to be what we want, and then we're going to be happy. But what happens is, let's say they change, then you're on to the next thing. Like, what else do they need to change? Because I'm not happy yet.
And that could be just being self-destructive, which was me. And I see people like that. It's like, wow, things are going well, but you find a way to ruin it for yourself, unconsciously, not even realize what you're doing. I want to talk about, when you decided to write a book, and because it's very sensitive to be able to, one, share your personal, because you want to also relate to your readers, and then of course as well be professional. I've heard this, that sometimes when people write a book, then when it comes to it's, whether it be like a biography, a self-help book, that it's sometimes going back and reliving that time, and either one being, okay, I don't want to deal with that, and then you have to keep going back and writing it to say, okay, I've dealt with this. I can write about this. What made you write your book and then decide, I'm going to share some of my personal experience? Because I'm sure it had to be a little uncomfortable at times.
Well, by the time I wrote my book, it wasn't. I started writing back in 2010, 2011 for Elephant Journal and then Huffington Post. And I was writing personal things that I was going through at the time. So at that time, back then, it was so uncomfortable because I felt very exposed. But I realized that the more honest I was, and real, that I could help more people that way. And so by the time I wrote the book, I had been wanting to write a book for years. It was just taking the time to do it and actually committing and doing it. And that's what I did, is I committed and I did it because I wanted to put something out there that would give people tools that they could implement, not just read a self-help book and go, oh, this is a great topic, thank you so much. It is, actual how-to. Like, you want to do this, this is how you do this. And so that's why I wrote it. And I know that, we learn well through stories. So by putting stories, my stories, client stories, in there, they would be relatable to the reader.
So is there any part specific in your book? And for those who, I want to make sure that you guys also, for those who are listening, Tracy's going to let you know where you can find her in the book. We're going to have her website. You can go to the interview and watch the live interview. Is there anything in the book that you can say that you would directly send like a potential person who would want to connect you to that, to say, this is specific, I want you to read this part or go to this chapter. And that kind of will give them a start in understanding?
I believe you have to start at the beginning, and I'm going to say why, and then I'll tell you how you can move around. So the first 3 chapters are really setting the foundation to change anything. Okay. So, you're talking about having an awareness, you're talking about learning to feel your feelings, and there's techniques and stuff in there on how to do that. Right. And then how to move through the book. The subsequent chapters after that, what they're doing, like, let's say one's on perfectionism as an example, because one is. And so you could read that and you're like, God, but I really have trouble with that. Or I always am looking for problems, right? I look for problems all the time. So you read the first 3 chapters, and then you could go to the problem chapter, or you can go to the perfectionism chapter. You can switch those things around, but it's really imperative that you read that, because if you don't, what happens is, and this is the problem a lot of people have, we intellectualize the information. And so we can talk it, we can think it until crisis happens, until we have to actually look at what we're doing. And then when we look at what we're doing, we're like, oh my God, what am I doing? Right. So it's really about doing that, getting in your body, learning to feel your feelings, because that's how you're going to learn about your patterns and your beliefs, because your feelings are connected to those things.
And okay, so I would say, what is your message for those who suffer with low self-esteem, having a hard time, like redeeming themselves, not having confidence, or self-confidence?
I would say that you have to start with baby steps. Do not feel like you've got to do something, like if you're in a dysfunctional relationship, like you have to go break up with him, because the bottom line is you're not going to be okay doing that. You're going to probably give yourself a panic attack, or you're going to want to get back to that relationship. You're not going to let go of it. So for me, when I'm talking to people who are just at the beginning, I would say to take your time and be patient with yourself. And what happens is every emotional risk, which is taking emotionally risky action, okay, that means that your action is causing you discomfort, okay? Every time you do that, you do it in small ways, you're building, see my muscle, you're building your self-esteem muscle, you're building your empowerment muscle, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. You realize, I can get uncomfortable, I can take a risk, I might disappoint someone, but the more you value yourself, you realize that you're disappointing people who aren't offering you anything in the first place, or you're disappointing people and they love you and they're like, that's fine. I don't know why you went and, decided you needed to do the things you did to begin with. Right. So a lot of it, again, is so self-imposed, and you have to recognize other people aren't doing it to you. You're doing it to you.
I'm glad you mentioned that about people feeling disappointing people, because I, as growing up as a child, most of us, I would think all of us, have been raised about not being selfish, being selfless. But sometimes people don't understand that I had to learn this, that I had to be selfish for myself, and then and choose my battles. And then it became, so what do I become selfish for myself for? But then it gets to that disappointing people, because I finally had learned to say, I used to, because it was hard for me to say no. And many people might be able to relate to this, to say, I don't want to do something. I don't feel that way. I don't agree. So instead I would say, let me just separate myself and cut them off. But I realized that didn't fix it, because I was still not being true to myself and saying, okay, I'm not happy with this. So I would just avoid the situation. And so, and only within the recent years for me, I said, okay, now I can still talk to you. You're not healthy for me mentally, but I can say no to you and be okay with your being upset with that. That's very difficult.
Yeah, it is, because it feels like an emotional risk. And that's what I'm saying. Emotionally risky action. We don't control other people. And a lot of times we're afraid to make movement because we're really manipulating other people. And we don't think we're manipulators, but we are. Because if I'm not showing up as me, and I'm showing up in a way that I think is pleasing to you, what I'm doing is I'm acting in ways that are manipulative so that you keep reacting to me how I want you to.
And that is exactly it. That is exactly it. and why you are so such, to me, a very important guest to have on the show, and for what you're saying. And I think it's relatable to anybody, because if you watch any of my shows, your view and structure is so relatable, different from anybody else I've ever heard, to be honest with you. And then, for anything that you would give to, how do I say that? Do you think mental health is as important or more important than physical? Because people seem to be so much into the physical look, what you physically look like. And I would think that, why I relate a lot of this person, why I said it relates to me, is I used to do the makeup and the hair and kept dieting and losing weight. And because I realized I was seeking attention, not realizing that's exactly what I was doing. And so I would need people to, I would need the, what do you call the gratitude, the
validation, right?
Yes. And so, and I did this for years and years. And so, and even affected relationships, because if they didn't say I was pretty every day, or I was attractive, or whatever, or something like that, then I thought, oh, they're doing something, or, and it was me. It was all in my head because of the attention that I didn't get the way I wanted to get when I was younger. Right. And so, and it took so many years to be like, I had to learn to be okay with me. And then was like, and then when I start changing things about myself, I know that people are like, oh, why did you, you don't wear makeup anymore. Why'd you change your hair? And it was like, I started thinking, so the things that I changed were superficial things. So then I thought, oh my God, they saw me as a superficial person. And then I really understood, like, wow, okay, this is sometimes maybe why people were reacting the way they were to me, because they saw me as a superficial person with a designer bag. And none of that I thought all of that, it was for me making myself feel better. But the way people saw me was completely different from how I wanted to be seen. Yeah. And I'm saying, well, why are they seeing me that way? You get what I'm saying? So do you think the importance that one is more than the other is equal?
So the thing is that you've got to do for yourself. So if you want a designer bag because you love it, you think it's like, it feels good to you, you look at it, you're like, God, I really love that. Great. If you're buying it so everybody else is going to look at it and go, that's an amazing bag, then you're not doing it for the right reasons. And you got to look at where your sense of lack comes from, because it comes from a sense of lack. It doesn't come from a sense of abundance. It doesn't come from a sense of feeling good about yourself. It's, how is everybody else going to perceive me? So that's the question to ask yourself. It's like, I love my car. I drive my car because I love my car, not because everybody's going, oh my God, that's an amazing car. It's, I love my car.
So yeah, that was a hard one for me. And so I literally, when I finally identified that was about 7 years ago, and one of, and I still even have homework today for my therapist, even though it's like, I still go back and I look at some of the things, and they say, write things you've done throughout the week, and then look back at it again. And so I ended up giving away like all kinds of stuff. And I was like, what the hell? And, and I was like, why am I going to the gym? I'm not even happy with that. So, I mean, so that's why I asked about the physical versus the mental. Now to me, I know that I would say I'm 90% mentally well. And because there's always that room for growth, or 20%, because it's always changing and times are changing. And I sometimes have to catch myself, I know we're closer to the end of the show, but I want to ask, for viewers who possibly want to get into the field of psychology, and be able to want to help people, because there's so many different ways of helping people. And, whether it be mental, whether it be family and relationship, because I don't think that if you personally individual, and I like how you said individual, that you offer individual help, that most people think I have to go in as a family or with my husband or my wife, but your problems and your personal concern may be totally different. And it could just be you, or maybe it is a group, but I think that individual help is important. What advice would you give to people who want to get into the field of psychology and what to prepare for, what to look for? Do you think that maybe they should make sure that they're okay?
I do, because a lot of times people go into psychology looking for answers for themselves or looking for the magic pill that somehow they're going to be able to, let's say, control other people, right? That they're going to be able to, and what I mean by control other people, nobody says, oh, I'm going to control other people. But what they think is, okay, I'll be able to act in ways that are going to change the relationship, but they're acting in ways to change the relationship. They're not acting in ways that honor themselves. And so, for me and, most of the people I went to school with, it was like that's what they're there for. And, I can help other people and I'll feel better about myself. But the truth is, you're not going to feel better about yourself until you actually take a deep dive into yourself, meaning get to know yourself. Get to know yourself at your deepest motivations, get to know yourself at your deepest beliefs, and start making changes that way. Because the more that you do that, then you can wake up and go, all right, now I want to go help other people. Because it's sort of like if you don't put gas in your own tank, then you're running on empty. And then, you're putting all this out here and it's coming from an empty place, right? So it really is about that. Whether you're going into psychology or any other field, you really want to know who you are, what makes you tick. And that's why it's important to know what your inner motivation is.
So so for those who have been listening, and as you know, my show is called Entrepreneur Life Show because, of course, as being a business owner myself, and everyone is some type of entrepreneur in some way, whether you're an entertainer or whatever you do. What I have learned to understand is no matter what you're doing, especially because I work with a lot of businesses, if you're not challenged or understand where you are personally, mentally, where your struggles are, why you continually make decisions. If your business is failing or you're failing, I always go back to, it's something with me. Mm-hmm. Why am I making that decision? So I think in every business owner, entrepreneur, I'd say because it's Entrepreneur Life Show, right? I think I don't think there's anything wrong with getting a little extra help. So
there is nothing wrong with it because, it's hard to see yourself. A lot of us, can listen today and go, oh my gosh, wow, me too. Yeah. But to do it on your own is a lot harder than if you have somebody to help you.
Yes. So before we close the show, everyone, I want to make sure that you guys do connect with Tracy. I mean, this was so good. And I know anybody can connect with this interview today. If you guys want to find the entire full interview, make sure you go to entrepreneurlifeshow.com. But I want to make sure where you can find Tracy. It'll be on the website, and you'll definitely want to connect with her and get her book. And because, we all need a little bit of help, if you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on here. And my book, it's booksellers everywhere, and tracycrossley.com, and you'll find out everything you need to know there, including my social media links, and you can get a free chapter of the book actually there too.
And your podcast. I think you have a podcast.
I do.
So let's not leave without talking about that. Make sure can they find your podcast on your show on all the apps out there?
Yeah. And they can also find it at tracycrossley.com/podcast. And it's on all the apps. It's been around for 6 years. It's called Freedom from Attachment. And I have a second one. It's on the same feed. It's called Moving On, where I talk to people who have actually moved on from literally drama in their lives. So it's great.
Well, thanks, everybody. We will see you next Thursday on the Entrepreneur Life Show. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you jump in on feedback if you want to connect with Tracy. She'll be on the website. But anyway, see you guys next week. Thanks to our subscribers. Bye, everybody.